It's a privilege to be with you. Our stories have woven together over the recent years, and it's been a little while since I've been with you, but it feels something like a homecoming. Thank you. Thank you for sending Sabeth to be at General Convention, to be about praying into the politics of our church. My time as chaplain over at Skyline had me in contact with many people and present at the end of many lives, and my work since then has been as a chaplain for hospice, working up in Skagit and Snohomish County with Hospice of the Northwest. And I've been privileged to, as I describe it, kind of parachute into people's lives and to show up and say, "Hi, how can I help?" My role is to tend to the emotional and spiritual well-being of patients and family members, their circle of support. It's put me in contact with an amazing variety of people, where sometimes paying attention to the news or watching people from a distance helps the cynic in me be strong. My work coming in and holding people's stories with them at the end of life has just left me stunned with the amazing qualities of people. Ask me about it at coffee hour. I'll start telling stories and just be grateful for the hearing. People are amazing. Their interests, their skills, their backstories, their experiences. But what I find that catches my attention is a particular dearth of fear. I had thought that as people are approaching the end of life, as so many of us have lived our lives in denial of our mortality and not knowing what comes except that death will come to each of us, I had thought that people would be nervous and have questions, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do because I don't have answers. And what I find is people are at ease by and large with the idea of dying. The fear isn't manifest. Maybe it's because the focus of hospice is on their comfort and helping them do what they want to do with the time they have. The fear isn't there. And it strikes me because so much of my life I'm, without even being conscious of it, fearful. I sent my son driving up I-5 last night. Would he make it? Was he going to be safe Saturday night on I-5? I don't know. I meet people with a variety of diseases and conditions, and I find myself thinking of my own body and my own mortality, and do I have this or that? Or it's stirred up in me. I look at the climate and hear the news of the heat domes and the changes, and I think, are we as a people going to figure out how to be on this planet without ruining it? Have we got the time and the will to change our needs? So much fear without even really giving it much attention. And I would put to you that we as a whole society experience fear of what is different from us, fear of losing what is precious to us. So what a gift. What a gift today to have some conversations through our scripture about fear and what God does with fear. We start off with the story of David. We've seen something of David. You may recall that Samuel the prophet was sent to anoint one of the sons of Jesse to be king. And when Jesse got all his sons together, Jesse didn't even pay attention to David. He was not worth bothering to bring in from tending the sheep. And yet, as the story unfolds, this unexpected boy is the one that God chose for Samuel to anoint. We're not there yet in our story. We'll hear about King David. But what we have today is this unexpected younger brother whose job is to go carry some food items to his brothers and to the army in battle. The Philistines have been attacking, and there's battle going on. And if you back up a little bit in our chapter, for 40 days, Goliath has been going out, the champion has been going out and saying, let's do this one-on-one. I'll take one of your people, and if I win, you're ours, and if you win, we're yours. David's not going to fight. David's going to deliver some parched grain, some loaves, and, interesting detail of Scripture, some cheese to the commander. He has some conversations with people as he hears the buzz in the camp. The army has been, you could say, steeped in fear. They see the power of the Philistine army. They see the power of Goliath, their champion, and they're not sure what to do with it. David's older brother even scolds him for saying, why does this guy get away with talking about God's people this way? And so David comes into an army steeped in fear, an army who's been living with the tension of that anxiety, and sees it with new eyes and knows what he can and cannot do when he's out on the land. He's accustomed to dealing with things more vicious, more powerful than he. And so he offers, let me kill him for you. And then we get that whole lovely description of how the traditional armor was put on him. It was too much. He couldn't even walk. And so he goes out with his staff and 5 stones from the wadi and his sling to meet Goliath. Big, powerful, notorious Goliath, with his chainmail and his bronze helmet, with his sword and his shield bearer, Goliath. You don't mess with Goliath. And there's this odd repartee between them where Goliath is confident in his strength, and David, as we tell the story, is confident in God. And you heard the outcome. David got close enough to use 1 stone in his sling to kill Goliath. And the Philistine army was vanquished. From carrying grain and cheese to the army to being the hero of the day. Because David refused to accept the fear that was holding the army. What are we going to do with the fear? The fear comes up again in today's gospel lesson as Mark tells the story. He's been laying out how Jesus is functioning. Jesus has been healing people. Jesus has been teaching. Jesus has been getting in trouble for behaving differently than the religious authorities expect. Jesus, at the end of a long day, says, okay, let's go over to the other side. Let's cross this lake. Let's get away from these people and find some peace. He's exhausted. The other side would have represented people outside of the immediate community. Let's go to a new place. Let's see something different. And he has with them, as we heard the calling, he has people among his disciples who are experienced fishermen. They know their boats. They know the rhythm of the weather. They know that it's possible for a windstorm to come up in the evening. Jesus wants to go, and they take him as he is in their other boats, Mark tells us. And so when the storm happens, no one is surprised, but what seems to be surprising is the vehemence of the storm, the fact that they were getting swamped. All of their best skill wasn't enough to keep them safe. And exhausted Jesus is asleep in the boat. And so they wake him and they name who he has been for them. Teacher, do you not care? Do you not care? We're perishing. You can imagine Jesus waking up, frustrated. All he wanted was a moment's rest. And the verb that's used, he rebuked, he scolded, he was mad at the storm and closed it down. And he told the wind, be still. And it was. I can just imagine the adrenaline pumping in the disciples, having been battling the weather, battling the water, reaching out to Jesus, saying, you've done so much, can't you do something now? And then, oh my God, he does. And a whole fresh experience of fear as they realize what Jesus has done. Throughout the Hebrew Scripture, especially in our Psalms, we're reminded that God is the one who controls the wind and the waves. God is the one. And here, Jesus has just done it. And their fear is great. What are we going to do with the fear? A piece of my training for chaplaincy has been continuing to do clinical pastoral education. Most clergy work hard to avoid doing more of that, and I've chosen to do some more in order to be board certified. But it involves a lot of reading, didactic work, and also small group work, holding up for one another questions and observations of one another's work and asking the questions that help us develop self-awareness. And I've had the privilege of navigating this experience with an amazingly skillful, mature, effective cohort who has, with so much love, held my feet to the fire, challenged my decades of chaplaincy, and asked for more and deeper and richer work and more manifest trust in God. And every now and then the CPE really works and I get a glimpse of the power of God working in our cohort, in our group, working in the lives of patients around me, working in my life and my ministry. And every now and then I think, oh my God, this is so much bigger than I had imagined. The fear is a different quality than my fear of loss or my fear that healing won't happen, than the fear that something tragic will occur to someone I know and love. You've spoken in recent weeks in this space about the shooting at the local high school and how to show up and be present for your neighbors. Be afraid of the guns on our streets and be afraid of what will happen if we don't work with the healing. We've been reminded by Nate about the small tasks that work the healing, about the things that we do that are not going to change the climate immediately, that are not going to bring about world peace in this moment, and yet that are the steps through which God heals the world. We prayed in our opening prayer that God never fails to help and to govern those whom God has set upon the sure foundation of what? Of God's loving kindness, of God's chesed, of God's love. In your life, I'm confident there are things that are challenging, there are places that you are not sure, anxieties come. And yet, those are the places in which God works. Mary Oliver has a poem, Maybe, written about the story of Jesus stilling the storm. Mary Oliver. Sweet Jesus, talking his melancholy madness, stood up in the boat and the sea lay down, silky and sorry. So everybody was saved that night. But you know how it is. When something different crosses the threshold, the uncles mutter together, the women walk away, the young brother begins to sharpen his knife. Nobody knows what soul is. It comes and goes like the wind over the water. Sometimes for days you don't think of it. Maybe after the sermon, after the multitude was fed, one or two of them felt the soul slip forth like a tremor of pure sunlight before exhaustion that wants to swallow everything, gripped their bones and left them. Miserable and sleepy as they are now, forgetting how the wind tore at the sails before he rose and talked to it, tender and luminous and demanding as he always was. 1,000 times more frightening than the killer storm. Mary Oliver. We come together, dear people of God, to remind ourselves of the power of God, to tell ourselves the story of the odd choices God has made, the unexpected heroes, to tell ourselves that Jesus does in fact have the power to still the storms. We come to take into our bodies the rhythms of our faith, the rhythms of our music, the rhythms of our prayer, to be surrounded by others who know and share it with us. We come to incorporate God into ourselves. And we discover again Jesus, tender and luminous and demanding, as he always is. We come encountering this 1,000 times more frightening than the killer storm presence because the world needs to know the loving kindness of God on which we are set. So as you think about your neighborhood, as you wonder about your future, as you trust the work being done in Louisville, as you come to incorporate God, know that God will never fail to help and to govern you. You are set in the love of God, equipped to work the small and powerful miracles of the one who has that power to still the storm. Thanks be to God.